Hi, everyone. How are you doing today? I am doing well, and I have a wonderful guest here, Dena. Hi, Dena.
Hi, Gerald. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Dena, as many of you probably know already, is Halfstitch Cross Stitch on YouTube. So you can find her on her YouTube channel, Halfstitch Cross Stitch. You can also follow her on Instagram, Halfstitch2017. Again, everything will be linked below as always. So make sure you go check her out, her channel and her Instagram. So we're going to jump right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into crafting, cross stitch particularly?
Okay. I'm probably not different than a lot of people you talk to. I started cross stitching for the first time at the age of 8. My mother was quite a seamstress and did embroidery, and I wanted to spend time doing what she was doing with her, so she taught me a few embroidery stitches, including a cross stitch. And the first project she gave me to stitch was a stamped kit. It was a pair of pillowcases that had little flowers and a butterfly on each one. And I did my best to stitch that, and the feedback that I got quite frequently is, your stitches don't need to be that tight, which I still got when I got my first comment from a judge years later. So I've always had tight stitches. I've finally gotten over that. But I will tell you, they were tight, Gerald. The actual pillowcase was puckered. They were so tight. So I wasn't really good at it, and I didn't do it anymore really after that. I got into sewing. My mother, as I said, was a good seamstress, so she started teaching me to sew. But in my early 20s, I found myself working day shift, and my husband was working night shift and going to school during the day. So my evenings stretched out many hours, with me having very little to do. And I noticed a coworker was stitching at lunch, cross stitching. And I started kind of watching what she was doing, and it just triggered that memory that I used to do a little bit of that. And I asked if she would refresh my memory and teach me again how to cross stitch. And she did. And so I have been stitching since my early 20s.
Yeah, that's pretty much like everybody else I interview. You start as a child and then you pick it back up in your 20s.
Right.
So you had mentioned that your mother taught you other embroidery stitches. Do you ever do those other stitches, or are you primarily a cross stitcher?
I've done them on occasion, like a lazy daisy stitch. Of course, we do French knots and cross stitching.
Sure.
That was one she taught, and back stitching she taught me. And I think there were a couple others I don't remember now. Like there was a straight stitch I know of some kind, but it was more like something a little fancy. But I don't remember the name of it now. And I haven't embroidered, other than doing the stitches I still do for cross stitch. That's all.
Okay. So then how would you describe your stitching style?
Oh, I would say a couple of things. One, I am a project stitcher, as we say, not a process stitcher. I think a lot of that came from when I got back into stitching. I was working full time, and then shortly after that I had a child. So I had so little time to stitch, as most people working and having families do, that I would pick a project to do, and what little bit of time I could stitch, I spent on that one project so I could finish it. It was usually for a gift for someone else. Mm-hmm. So it sort of created in me the idea that whatever I start, I finish for a purpose. I tend to still do that. I tend to pick everything I stitch is either going to be a gift for someone in particular, or it's for my home. It's going to be a decoration in my home or something I use in my home. And I want it finished. So I have grown from one project at a time to up to 8. I'm more comfortable with about 8. If I get more than that, I start getting a little antsy. I'd like to touch each project every month so that I can see it move a little bit. I'm not obsessed about, I have to finish everything this quick. I enjoy the process of stitching on what I'm stitching, but I am stitching it for a purpose. So I very, readily fall into that project stitcher, I think.
Okay. So, okay, then your project stitch, what kind of projects do you like to stitch?
I really have a variety of things that I work on. I started out stitching baby gifts and presents for people. So it was things that were small, like you would stitch someone a pretty picture for their kitchen, or hot pad, for their table, or towels, hand towels, and things like that. But when I really got busy stitching, I started stitching Mirabilias. I've stitched a few of those. But I also like the Quaker designs. I did the Quaker Christmas by Bygone Stitches, was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. And I have worked on some Little House Needleworks now, the little smaller projects. I've done quite a few ornaments. I've done 4th of July ornaments, Christmas ornaments, Halloween ornaments. So those are the kind of smalls that I've done. So I like a variety of projects. I've done some Mill Hill now, but I only knew of a few designers when I first got into cross stitch. We had an LNS when I was really early in the stitching in Georgia that I loved, and knew the owners, and enjoyed going there. The wife that owned the store would really help us choose projects and fabric and things like we have today at those that are lucky enough to have an LNS. And her husband did the framing at about 1/3 of the cost of a big box store, because she wanted to encourage us to frame our pieces and display them. But they wound up both having health issues and had to sell their business, and it closed. So we're unfortunately now in a state with no LNS in the entire state. So we don't have a brick and mortar store anywhere. So my frame of reference for designers kind of froze. Back in those 80s and 90s when I was stitching the Dale Burdettes and Gloria and Pat and Alma Lynn. These are ancient designers to you, but that's who I cut my teeth on. When I found Mirabilia, that was a big discovery. But with FlossTube, the whole world has opened up, and so I'm enjoying exploring new designers.
So then before FlossTube, before FlossTube, and then before or after your LNS did close, how did you explore and find other designers or other styles?
There were really, for me, I was quite isolated. I was working, really going through a career progression, pursuing that career. And so what little time I had, I used to subscribe to magazines. Mm-hmm. So I had a subscription to 2 or 3 different cross-stitch magazines, and that was the bulk of what I got. And then when we would go on vacation, I would always look in the local area for a store, and we found Dixie Darlin up in Pigeon Forge. And so if we were anywhere within an hour of their vacation, we would usually have to go through there for me. And sure. I would spend a little time, there. My husband would take a nice long walk around town. But that was about it, really and truly. I didn't know about blogs. I had never heard of them. I was not really internet savvy at that point. All the software stuff I knew, I learned at work to use for work. Sure. I never came home and got on a computer and explored anything when I got home. So I was quite in the dark ages, I would think, when it comes to any kind of exposure to how do you get new information. When my son introduced me to FlossTube, I was floored. Absolutely, as the British would say, gobsmacked. I had no idea that was out there. It was a wonderful discovery.
Okay, we're gonna hold that for a second, because I'm just shocked that your son was the one that introduced you to FlossTube. So we'll get back to that in a second. Okay. So before we get there, so let's talk real quick about, you are an eclectic stitcher. You stitch all kinds of different designs because you're now just overwhelmed with all these different designs and everything out there.
Right.
So what kind of mediums do you like to use for your stitching? Are you do you have particular styles of fabric and flosses that you prefer to use? Or do you stick to the pattern, the prescribed patterns? What do you like to do whenever you do find a pattern you want to stitch?
Oh, well, one of the first things I ever started using was a hoop, and then I moved to Q-snaps years and years and years ago, and I love Q-snaps. Then I discovered lap frames from FlossTuber, of course, and then I discovered roller frames, and I've gotten some of all of these, you know, and I actually use them all. It depends on my project. It depends on what I'm trying to do with that project, and I try to find whichever item is going to help me progress that project along the easiest. You know, what's the most convenient for what I'm stitching on. So I mix it up, and that keeps it interesting too, you know.
And go ahead.
As far as fabric, I love even weave. I have stitched on linen and Aida. I like them all, but I'm not a fan of the slubs. I'm just not a fan of slubs. So I think they make my stitches look wonky. And so rather than fight with that, I just prefer an even weave. And I love the hand-dyed fabrics. I didn't know they existed. I used neutrals, you know, beige, white. That was it, until I found out there was a lot more out there. And at first, they were a little off-putting to me. They appeared busy to me. They appeared to take away from the stitching when I first saw them because they were so different. But the more I saw them on FlossTube, the more I saw the way people were picking fabrics that highlighted the color pattern in what they were stitching, and it complemented it, then I really began to see the beauty of them, and I started experimenting with them, and I love them. Absolutely love them now. So unfortunately, because they're usually more costly, but I do. I like even weave, and I love the, you know, the beautiful hand-dyed fabrics. I use mostly DMC. I do use some hand-dyed cottons that are required at times. You know, if I feel like I'm like a lot of other people, if there's a lot of variegation in that floss, then that's what I want. You know, if hardly any variegation at all, I don't worry about it. And then I do have silks. I'm using silks on 2 of my projects right now. The first one was my chatelaine that I got and bombed miserably on starting that. And so it's been in timeout until I grew up as a stitcher. And then the second time, it's true. I got it too soon. I wasn't ready. And then the second time, I'm using silks on my Flowers of the Holy Night, which is a Glendon Place pattern. And those are beautiful, and I'm enjoying them. They feel so lovely. But they do, they shed color as you're stitching, so you have to be careful that you don't get smudges on your fabric from your floss. That was new to me.
That you don't have too long of a strand when stitching, yes. Because I love to have my long strands of DMC because they're just simple, and I can have really long strands, and then whenever I go to something different like silk, and I'm like, oh, I can't have long strands anymore, and it's like, oh, this is such an inconvenience.
And you have to learn that, you know.
Yeah.
You hear it from somebody else and say, oh, good, thank you for that tip, or you learn it yourself by trial and error. You know, that's what works.
Yeah, as I was stitching on Lady of the Flag the other day, and I haven't stitched with metallics lately, and all of a sudden I was using metallic, and I'm like, oh yeah, I do need to use shorter strands because it starts the fray. And I'm like, you know, you just don't think about it if you don't use it that often, and then so yeah, definitely. So I'm curious, how are you going to know that you've matured enough to go back to your chatelaine if you put it in timeout?
I figured once I start feeling the urge to do what I'm going to need to do to stitch it, then I'll be ready. My biggest problem was the pattern was, you know, it's a book. It's written with a lot of instructions on what you stitch where. And I found the one I had was not linear. It was not in the order that I'm to stitch. There's references to different stitches in different parts of the product all throughout. And so I'm going to have to copy it I think for me, and cut and paste it to where it's going to be in the order that I'm going to stitch the pattern.
Okay.
So what I'm doing makes sense to me, and then I can follow it. Because what I did, I'll tell you what I did. This is Confessions of a FlossTuber, so I'll give you a confession here. I started it with Tracy P. in a stitch along, and we started it at the same time, and we were showing our progress, and I showed my first one on my YouTube channel of the little house in the middle. I'm doing the Alpine seasons.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay.
Very pretty. And
Yes.
I did the little cabin in the middle, and I talked about it on my channel, and I said, oh man, this little tiny one over one petty point right here just about killed me. And I get this private message from Tracy. She didn't do this public comment. She did it privately, not to embarrass me. And she wrote me and she said, oh, sweetheart, you are working way too hard. That's supposed to be a half stitch. There was some instructions somewhere in all that paper that said it was half stitch, but the way it looked to me on the pattern, it looked like it was 1 over 1. Mm-hmm. And so I had done more work than I needed to, and I'm not frogging it out. So instead it went into timeout. And I thought, I'm not managing this well. I have to put this away for a while. But I'm just about ready to tackle it again. So that may be coming out next year.
Excellent. Well, I'll be looking forward to that.
Well, thank you.
Whenever you pull yours out, I'll start working on mine again.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
That's a deal.
Mine's not in timeout. Mine just put aside because I have too much other stuff to work on. I can't focus on that right now, but I'll definitely pull back out whenever you pull yours out.
Okay, that's a deal.
So then let's go to YouTube. Why did you, well, you found YouTube from your son. Let's talk about that. How did he find YouTube or FlossTube?
Well, he went looking for it for me. He had been a fan of YouTube for many years. He at one time had a book channel on YouTube and gave book reports or book reviews, whatever they do. And so he kind of knew the world of YouTube a lot differently than I did. I didn't know it existed. And I think he thought I was going to be bored when I retired from the workforce. When I decided to quit work and stay home. And I think he was looking for something, afraid I was going to be, just pulling my hair out with nothing to do, which wasn't the case, but I'm glad he thought that. So he came in one Saturday morning and he said, Mom, there's something I want to show you. So he taught me how to go on YouTube on the computer, and he said, type in cross stitch in the search bar. So I did. And all these videos popped up, and he said, look for one with a lot of subscribers for now. And that because they should be pretty popular, they might be somebody that, has a wide following, a variety of things. He said, you can start there and then just keep looking. So the first one I saw was Carolyn Mazio. Mm-hmm. And I started watching her video. And he said to me, besides, Mom, as long as you've been stitching, you ought to be able to do some tutorials and teach these people some things. Famous last words. So I start watching YouTube, and I start binge watching. I cannot cut it off. I knew it was bad when my son came over to me later that evening and said, are we going to eat today or what? I hadn't even stopped for lunch. I was just watching YouTube. It was amazing. It was a whole new world to me. And I watched it for several months before I ever attempted to do my own videos. But if it hadn't been for him finding it, I don't know that I ever would have known that it was out there. So I credit him for introducing me to YouTube. I do recall after that first weekend of binge watching, I said, JT, I will not be doing any tutorials because I've just gone back to school. I feel like I'm back in college. I have so much to learn. Mm-hmm. And it was true. I did. I had just been in a vacuum for, it was like being in a time capsule, like you go to sleep and wake up 20 years later. That really, I had no new information in all that time. Yeah. So it was quite amazing.
Yeah, Carolyn was the first one that I found too, and I don't even remember what I was looking up. I was looking up some kind of, just to ensure, because I was just coming back to cross stitch, and 3 years ago now, and mm-hmm. I guess I was just wanting to reassure myself that I was doing the right thing. Yeah. I don't know if that's what it was, so I just randomly typed it in, and I found that I did the same thing as you. I think I binged for 4 days straight, other than going to work, just because I was like, wow. And then, you know, and I learned a lot because I didn't know how to do French knots before FlossTube. So, I mean, I didn't know anything about hand-dyed fabrics or even weaves, or, you know, I only ever stitched on Ada before that.
Oh.
So, you know, I learned that it's definitely opened up my eyes as well. So.
True. Me too.
So then why did you decide to get a YouTube channel?
One, and I wish I could remember who said it, but one of the FlossTubers that I watched said that the reason they were making their FlossTube videos was to document their own work for themselves. And the fact that other people might enjoy watching it was sort of secondary when they got started. But the fact that it was a way for them to chronicle their work on a project. I'm the world's worst about taking a picture of it. I don't ever think to take a picture before I start, and I never do. And so I never have a before picture. And I just thought, you know, that is a great way for me to chronicle the project as it goes from start to finish, and also what I've done over the past few years, because I do give away a lot of what I stitch to close friends. Sure. And I'll never see them again. So my videos would be a way for me to go back and look at them and remember, you know, how much I enjoyed stitching that for somebody. So I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And I did like a lot of people. I thought, I'll video it, and then I don't have to put it up if I don't like it. You know? Yeah. I did the first one, and it wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't, you know, I wasn't humiliated by myself. So I went ahead and put it out there just to see what would happen. And I had a wonderful response, as I think most FlossTubers do. It's such a giving and accepting community, and people were so kind. They really were encouraging. And I thought, well, okay, this will be all right. This is fun. I think now it's almost a friendship. You know, there are people I hear from after each video that will send me a comment, or send me a private message if they're friends with me on Facebook or something. And I enjoy it a lot, you know, hearing back from other people and talking with them as we go. So excellent. I'm glad I did it. I've enjoyed it.
So how has your stitching changed as a result of your YouTube channel?
Well, I think pretty common that people who have a YouTube channel feel a responsibility to have something to share. If you're going to do a channel episode that people are going to take their time to watch, you want to share something with them. And so I think it makes me feel responsible to stitch, you know, to sit down and stitch maybe on a day that I might not have otherwise. I may still try to eke out, you know, 30 minutes or something just to get a little more done on that project, so I have a little more to show. It also helps me to plan more. I'm a planner anyway, and so I'm trying to plan what I'm going to be stitching and try to plan that variety so it's more interesting to different people. Not everybody likes everything you work on, so I'm hoping that, you know, amongst everything I do, there might be one thing they like and might want to see till the end. So I think it really makes you responsible, maybe. You feel kind of responsible to your hobby. I don't feel obligated that I have to do it to the point that it's a job. I think that would be detrimental, you know, to my enjoyment of it. But I do feel like that, okay, I don't want to film if I don't have something good to say or something good to show, you know.
And your channel, you do it in a slightly different way than most people, because most people sit down and they talk about everything that they've done through the week or the month or how the period of time that since their last video. But you do it differently. So can you talk a little bit more about how you set up your episodes?
Yeah, I started out like you're describing. I put everything on the dining room table, stacked it in order, had notes taped everywhere. and tried to remember everything I wanted to say about each project. And if I forgot, I'd have to start over because I didn't know how to edit. And I kind of felt like after the aftermath of that, you have to clean everything back up and put all the projects back in their packages and project bags. And I just got to the point where I thought, you know, if I can link these together into a video, I would much rather describe what I want to say right after it so I can remember it. And then I don't forget everything I wanted to comment about that project that I was working on, what I learned, or, you know, something funny that happened with it, or something frustrating, like I had to frog half of it or something. So I just experimented with it and started after each rotation or each project that I worked on, I would video the progress on it and talk about it a little bit and, you know, just save it on my phone. And then when it's time for the video, I just link them all together and try to put a little, you know, highlighter in between it, you know, title page in between it to tell you what's coming. I think that helps people fast forward to it as well. If they only want to see one project I'm working on, they can just skip over to it and, you know, may help them get through it a little bit quicker. But it makes it easier for me. I already have that project out. I can video about it. I remember what I want to say. And then, you know, I'm done. I put it up and I don't have to get anything out again. So it's efficient for me, makes it easier. So I'm glad people like it.
I like it because it's different. It gives me a different format to watch. Not every video is exactly the same. It's, you know, it's I know when I'm watching your channel, it's going to be a different kind of episode because I'm going to get to see each project the way that you're working on it, and, you know, in chronological order, and, you know, your commentary on it while you're working on it. So it's a nice change to, not saying that the other ways aren't nice, because I do it the other way. So just, you know, it's a nice change. It's a nice contrast.
Yeah. I like that it's a little different. That will make it maybe unique enough that somebody might want to watch it.
Yeah. You had alluded to the way you like to plan your patterns or your projects.
Yes.
To I guess provide variety. And I've noticed you've been doing that a lot more lately, and you talk about it on your episodes about, okay, so you have certain categories. And so can you talk a little bit about how that evolved?
Yeah, when I first started YouTube, I had a few projects that were whatever I was working on before I got started. And originally, most of it was a memorabilia, or it was a little small for a gift. And then I started thinking, well, I don't have anything for holidays. I don't have anything for 4th of July. I don't have anything for Halloween. The only thing I've ever stitched for was Christmas, because that's one of my favorite times of the year. I don't have anything for Easter. And how am I going to get there? So Stitch Mania came into my life, watching, you know, the Facebook groups. And the first year I was scared to death of 15 starts. So I did 5. I did one every 3 days. And that's when I started Sleeping Beauty. That was in 2016. By the next year, I decided, I know I'm going to do Christmas ornaments. And so I upped it to about 7, and I did Christmas ornaments. And then the next time I wanted to do a grouping, I did Halloween ornaments. And I did them in phases where I was doing all Halloween ornaments, and then I was doing all Easter ornaments. And so everything I was working on was that holiday. And I thought, well, that's kind of boring. So to me, even, you know, I don't want to do different, you know, Easter things in a row and not have anything else to work on. So now I've decided that I would like to do a piece or a project for different times, different seasons, or different purposes, you know, as I go. So I may be working on a Christmas present for a friend, and I may be working on a Christmas piece for me, and then I might also be working on a Halloween piece, you know, or an Easter piece or something like that. So I actually went and took my stash. You're going to laugh now. This is the kind of planner I am. I took my stash and I split it that way. So my stash is stored in those holiday timeframes or seasonal, groupings. So all my fall is together, all my Christmas is together, all my Easter's together. And that way, when I get ready to do my new stars, I go get a different, I grab that grouping that's different from what I'm stitching, and I get a different one. So I try to keep variety that way.
So then within each category, do you have a specific plan of attack of how you're going to choose your pattern, or is it just whatever you're feeling like at the moment that it's time to change?
Both. In some of the areas, I have a pattern I really want to start, and I put it at the front. I know that's the next one I want to do. In other categories, I just go through them all, and I see what I want to work on. And it can depend sometimes if I have a lot of really large projects, like a Sleeping Beauty, then I may not want to start my largest project in that category at the same time. I might want a smaller project. And so that may influence which one I do next. So it's kind of fluid. It depends on what else I'm working on, at the same time. But there are some that are definite next, no matter what else. I've got them at the front of that, and that's what I'm going to do next for that category.
And I'm sure that changes if other things come out or you purchase new patterns and you're like, oh, I got to do this right away.
Yes,
Yep.
it can change, yeah.
Excellent. So do you have any advice for a new person, not necessarily a new person stitching, but maybe somebody that's on the fence for starting? I ask everybody this. For somebody that might be interested in starting a YouTube channel or a FlossTuber channel, but hasn't done it because they're too anxious or nervous about, either providing something that's different or just not sure if they're going to fit into the community.
I would say, first of all, don't worry so much about trying to devise an image or a personality. Just be yourself. Mm-hmm. The more genuine I think a person is, the more we're going to respond to that person. So I would just say, if you're passionate about what you're stitching, it comes through. If you like the project you're working on, you describe what you're doing and why you chose it. Tell us the story behind it. I love to know that. I love to know why you pick a certain pattern, or what is your plan of attack? How, like when you describe what you were going to do and how you were going to stitch your By the Bay, it just, I enjoy hearing what your thought process is, because that may very well trigger an idea for me as well, but it helps me to know you. So I would just encourage them to be their self, not be so worried about format. It'll come. You'll fall into your own groove, I think. I didn't start out vlogging, so, you just sort of it comes. But I think someone who's just genuinely interested in what they're doing and they want to share it, we respond to that. We will feel it. And I think we'll enjoy getting to know who they are. I watch a lot of FlossTubers, and they're all very different, very different. And I think that's part of the joy is, having that variety in the community on who we get to watch. Makes it interesting.
So is there any plans in the future for your channel or your stitching that you anticipate changing or evolving to?
I have thought about that. One of the concerns you do have, I think, if you've been doing a YouTube channel for a little while, is you don't want it to become boring. You don't want it to become, oh, it's the same old thing every time. I'm hoping that I'll stitch on enough new and different things that what I'm stitching will keep it interesting. I have started putting in a little more of my personal life in there. I don't put a lot of my personal life in my YouTube channel, but I have found that people enjoy book reviews. People that like to read enjoy that. I always put it at the end so people can skip it if they don't like it. And I have put little pictures and describe places I've gone that are unique in my new community, because I've recently moved here. So I'm learning a new place, and I'm sharing that, as it goes. So probably that will continue. That's kind of a new thing I've started doing. And I think that will be there, but still only a small portion. It's still about stitching, you know.
Excellent.
I can't think of any other changes.
What's that?
I can't think of any other changes. I think probably maybe one, I would like to have more people come and stitch with me and us do videos together.
Yeah.
Like you and I are doing it virtually. I would love to have people to come to my home that live near enough to me that we can stitch together and we can, you know, share some of that day with the viewers that are.
And I'm sure that will be widely accepted and loved. So
that's awesome. Well, at least then there's two people in case you don't like one. Hopefully you like the other one, you know. So,
well, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your experiences with us. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure for me too, and I really appreciate it. And I hope you all enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you go and check out Dena's channel on YouTube, FlossTuber, Halfstitch Cross Stitch, and give her some love and hearts on Instagram whenever she posts at Halfstitch 2017. Again, everything's linked below. So go check her channel and Instagram out, and we will see you next time in a couple weeks for another wonderful FlossTuber here on my channel. And don't forget to always be creative. See you guys later. Thanks, Dena. Bye. Bye, Cheryl.